What you're about to hear should have remained buried forever in the secret archives of the Theosophical Society. Edgar Cayce, known worldwide as the Sleeping Prophet, revealed in his final sessions something that completely contradicts everything he had publicly taught about the passage of souls. This discovery goes against decades of accepted spiritual teachings and will shake everything you believe about what happens at the exact moment of death. After hearing this revelation, you will never see the departure of a loved one the same way again. If you were guided to this truth today, it wasn't a coincidence. Your consciousness is ready to expand beyond the veils of illusion. On a freezing January afternoon in 1945, Edgar Cayce awakened from his last prophetic trance trembling, not from the cold that cut through the air of Virginia Beach, but from what he had just witnessed. For the first time in 43 years of psychic readings, he had seen something that deeply disturbed him. His wife Gertrude immediately noticed that something was different. His eyes, normally serene after a session, were wide with astonishment. "They don't leave," whispered Cayce, still disoriented. "The souls, they don't depart when we think they depart." But this wasn't the first time this truth had haunted the great mystics of our era. Decades earlier, Helena Blavatsky, the founder of Theosophy and one of the most controversial women of the 19th century, had documented similar experiences in her secret writings. Writings that only came to light decades after her death, revealing observations she never dared publish during her lifetime. Listen carefully to this. What these two giants of spirituality discovered goes against all traditional religious logic. They realized that the human soul doesn't simply depart at the moment of physical death. There exists a period, a sacred space between life and true departure, where consciousness remains anchored to earth in ways we never imagined. If you've ever felt the presence of someone who passed away, if you've ever had the inexplicable sensation that they're still around, you weren't imagining things. Leave a like if this is making sense to you, because what I'm about to reveal next will confirm your deepest intuitions about the nature of consciousness after death. Edgar Cayce always knew he possessed an extraordinary gift. Since childhood, he could enter altered states of consciousness and access impossible information. But it was only in a specific reading, conducted in October 1938, that he discovered something that would shake his own beliefs about death. A desperate woman had sought out Cayce. Her 19-year-old son had died in a car accident 3 weeks earlier, and she swore he was still at home, not as a frightening apparition, but as a loving and constant presence. She felt his perfume in the room, heard familiar footsteps in the hallway, and even found objects moved from place to place, always in a caring way, never threatening. When Cayce entered a trance to investigate the situation, what he saw left him perplexed. The young man really was there, not as a trapped ghost or lost soul, but as a consciousness that simply hadn't completed its transition yet. Cayce described a kind of intermediate zone, where the soul remains close to loved ones for a variable period. "The soul doesn't depart immediately," revealed Cayce during the session. "There's a time of adjustment, of gradual farewell. Some remain 3 days, others 3 years. It depends on the level of emotional attachment and the nature of the departure. But here's what most impressed Cayce. The young man wasn't suffering. He was in a state of deep peace, but chose to remain close to help his mother through the grieving process. The soul had full awareness of its situation and was using this intermediate period to heal not only itself, but also those who remained. This revelation directly contradicts traditional Christian teachings about immediate judgment and instant departure to heaven or hell. It also challenges spiritualist concepts about immediate reincarnation. What Cayce discovered is that there exists a sacred space, a time of transition where the soul maintains conscious connection with the earthly plane. Helena Blavatsky had observed similar phenomena decades earlier. In her private writings, she documented cases of conscious post-death permanence that lasted weeks, months, and even years. She called this period the intermediate state of consciousness, where the soul gradually releases its earthly bonds. Before continuing, tell me in the comments, from which city are you listening to me? I'm curious to know where the people who feel this connection with deeper truths are located. Write your city in the comments. It might be that other people from your region are also listening to this at the same moment. But what I just told you is only the beginning, because what happened in the following experience defies all logic. Helena Blavatsky was always considered a woman ahead of her time. Born into a Russian aristocratic family in 1831, she dedicated her life to unraveling the mysteries of consciousness and death. But it was during her stay in Tibet, between 1868 and 1870, that she discovered something that Western spiritual science would take decades to understand. The Tibetan lamas had preserved for centuries specific knowledge about the period immediately after death. They knew that the soul doesn't depart instantly, but remains in a state they called bardo, a space between dimensions where consciousness gradually disconnects from the physical plane. Blavatsky meticulously documented her observations. She witnessed rituals where monks could communicate with newly departed souls during the first 3 days after death. It wasn't mediumship in the Western sense, but a refined spiritual technology that allowed direct contact with consciousness in transition. The soul remains close to the body for approximately 72 hours, wrote Blavatsky in her secret diaries. During this period, it maintains an etheric connection that allows communication and even influence over the physical environment. Listen carefully to this. What Blavatsky discovered is that these first 72 hours are crucial. The soul is literally learning to exist without the physical body, like someone who spends their entire life inside a house and suddenly finds themselves outside. They need time to orient themselves in the new reality. Edgar Cayce, decades later, and without knowing Blavatsky's secret writings, reached the same conclusions. In one of his most detailed readings about the death process, he described how the soul remains floating close to the body for a period that varies from 3 to 72 hours, depending on the circumstances of death. Sudden deaths prolong this period, revealed Cayce. The soul becomes disoriented, trying to understand what happened. It can take days or weeks to completely accept the new condition, but here's where things get even more intriguing. Both Blavatsky and Cayce discovered that the soul doesn't just remain close, it maintains an ability to influence the physical environment. Lights that flicker, electronic devices that malfunction, temperatures that change without explanation. These aren't coincidences. They're manifestations of a consciousness that hasn't yet completely learned to exist without physical form. Write in the comments what your first reaction to this was. Have you ever experienced something similar after losing someone dear? And it was during one of these investigations that Blavatsky discovered something even more surprising. Some souls don't stay just 3 days. Some remain for years, decades. And the reason will shake everything you think about love, attachment, and spiritual freedom. In 1942, Edgar Cayce received a consultation that would forever change his understanding about the permanence of souls on Earth. An entire family was being visited by a patriarch who had died 5 years earlier. These weren't haunted apparitions or disturbing phenomena. It was a constant, loving presence, but impossible to ignore. The man had been an extremely protective father in life. After his death, the family began to notice unmistakable signs of his presence. Doors that opened when the children arrived from school. The aroma of his favorite cigar during important decision moments. Vivid dreams where he offered practical advice that always proved to be correct. When Cayce entered a trance to investigate, what he discovered revolutionized his understanding about the post-death process. The man was consciously choosing to remain close to the family, not because he was trapped or confused, but because his paternal love was so intense that he simply couldn't depart. Love is the most powerful force in the universe, revealed Cayce during the session. And when that love is intense, it can create bridges between dimensions. The soul can choose to remain, to continue caring, protecting, guiding. Helena Blavatsky had observed identical phenomena decades earlier. In her studies about post-death permanence, she identified what she called golden prisons of consciousness. Situations where extreme love becomes a subtle form of attachment that prevents the soul from following its natural evolutionary path. But here's what most disturbed both Cayce and Blavatsky. These souls weren't suffering in the traditional sense. They experienced a form of contentment by remaining close to loved ones. The problem is that this contentment was preventing their natural spiritual growth. It's like a child who refuses to leave their parents' home, wrote Blavatsky. Comfortable, safe, but prevented from discovering their true potential. Edgar Cayce made an even more impactful discovery. He realized that the very emotional energy of the living can influence how long the soul remains connected to Earth. Families who cannot let go, who desperately cling to the memory of the deceased, can inadvertently prolong this transition period. Excessive grief can become an energetic chain, warned Cayce. When the living cannot accept the departure, they create an emotional magnetic field that pulls the soul back. Share your own experience in the comments. Have you ever felt that the intensity of your grief could be influencing the presence of someone who passed away? And it was at that moment that Cayce realized he wasn't alone in that room during the reading. Something was watching, an ancient and wise presence that was about to reveal the deepest secret about the permanence of souls. What Edgar Cayce witnessed at that moment completely changed his perspective about life, death, and the nature of time. The presence he felt during the reading wasn't from the man who had remained 5 years close to the family. It was something much older, a consciousness that had remained connected to Earth for decades. During the trance, Cayce had a vision that left him speechless. He saw a soul that had died in 1863 during the American Civil War, a young soldier who had promised his wife that he would return home. When he died in battle, his soul, moved by that promise, remained literally waiting close to the place where he had promised to return. 79 years, murmured Cayce when he awakened from the trance. 79 years waiting to fulfill a promise. Helena Blavatsky had documented similar cases in her secret archives. Souls that remained trapped by unfulfilled promises, unresolved loves, unspoken words. She discovered that time for these consciousnesses doesn't flow linearly. What for us are decades, for them might seem like only moments of waiting. The soul exists outside linear time, wrote Blavatsky. A promise made with sufficient emotional intensity can create a temporal anchor that keeps consciousness connected to the earthly plane indefinitely. But what most shocked Cayce was discovering that this soul from 1863 wasn't alone. During the vision, he perceived an entire invisible population of souls that remained close to Earth for extraordinarily long periods, some for decades, others for centuries. Pay attention. What Cayce saw completely defies our understanding about the afterlife. There are souls that choose to remain not just to protect family members, but to fulfill specific missions, to wait for the right moment to reunite with soulmates, to finish spiritual work they consider incomplete. They're not lost, revealed Cayce. They're waiting, and some wait with a patience that only eternity can teach. Edgar Cayce discovered that some of these souls develop extraordinary wisdom during their prolonged stay. They become invisible guides, helping other souls in transition, comforting the living during moments of crisis, subtly influencing events to create opportunities for healing and growth. Helena Blavatsky called these entities voluntary guardians. Souls that choose to remain at the threshold between worlds, to serve as bridges between the physical and spiritual. If you feel it's no coincidence that you're here listening to this, if you've always known intuitively that there's more happening around us than our eyes can see, comment "I feel it" below. But the greatest revelation was still to come, because what Edgar Cayce discovered about his own death, about the destiny that awaited his own soul, this you need to hear in the second part. What he saw about his post-death future will explain why some of us were chosen to receive this information and what our true mission is in this life. Stay until the end, because the greatest secret is still to come. In 1944, 1 year before his own death, Edgar Cayce made a discovery that shook the foundations of organized spirituality. During a particularly intense reading, he accessed records that revealed a truth carefully hidden for centuries. The religious institutions themselves knew about the prolonged permanence of souls, but chose to keep this information secret. When he opened that etheric document during the trance, the words he read changed everything. But what was written inside challenged 2,000 years of established Christian doctrine. They always knew, murmured Cayce upon awakening. The early church fathers, medieval mystics, theologians, they all knew that souls don't depart immediately, but this truth was deliberately suppressed. Helena Blavatsky had discovered similar evidence decades earlier. In her studies of ancient texts and lost manuscripts, she found consistent references to what early Christians called the period of sacred vigil, a time between physical death and the soul's true ascension. St. Paul knew, wrote Blavatsky in her private notes. When he spoke about being caught up to the third heaven, He was describing exactly this experience of conscious permanence between dimensions. But why was this information hidden? The answer Cayce discovered is disturbing. If people knew that souls remain close after death, it would radically change how we live, how we die, and how we process grief. Religious power structures would lose control over the fear of death and judgment. Fear of death is the most powerful tool of spiritual control, revealed Cayce. If people knew that death is just a gradual transition, that our loved ones continue close and conscious, the power of institutions over souls would be broken. Listen carefully to this. Cayce discovered that original biblical texts contained clear references to this intermediate period, but these passages were systematically removed or reinterpreted during the early church councils. The truth about the permanence of souls was buried, along with hundreds of other authentic mystical teachings. Helena Blavatsky had faced fierce persecution precisely for trying to bring these truths to light. Her Theosophical Society was attacked not only by skeptics, but by religious authorities who feared that her teachings about the real nature of death would destabilize doctrinal control. For those who always knew there was more, who felt intuitively that the truth about death had been distorted, you were right. If you're part of this special group of people who question the official versions about the mysteries of existence, leave a comment saying, "I always knew." And then, for the first time in decades of silence, Edgar Cayce decided to break protocol. What he said next about his own experience with souls that had remained on Earth for centuries will reveal why this information is so dangerous to established structures. Edgar Cayce kept secret for years the most transformative experience of his life. It wasn't during a mediumistic trance or a reading for a client. It was a December night in 1943, when he was personally visited by a soul that had remained on Earth for more than 400 years. Cayce was alone in his office, reviewing notes from his most recent sessions, when he felt a powerful presence manifest. It wasn't the subtle energy he normally perceived during trances. It was a full consciousness, vibrant, almost physical in its intensity. "I turned around and he was there," Cayce confessed years later to his wife Gertrude, a man dressed in clothes from another era. Deep eyes, full of a wisdom that only centuries of observation can bring. He spoke without moving his lips directly into my mind. The entity identified itself as an alchemist who had died in 1587, but instead of moving on to other dimensions, he had chosen to remain close to Earth to guide other truth-seekers through the centuries. He revealed to Cayce that there are thousands of souls like him, ancient consciousnesses that voluntarily remain as invisible guardians of humanity. "We are the living library of Earth," communicated the entity. "Each era produces some of us, souls that choose to stay to preserve knowledge, to guide, to protect spiritual secrets during the dark periods of human history." Helena Blavatsky had been contacted by similar entities during her youth in Tibet. She described these encounters as communions with the invisible brotherhood. Ancient souls that had transcended the need for reincarnation, but chose to remain close to Earth as spiritual mentors. "They taught me that physical death is just the first step of a very long ladder," wrote Blavatsky. "Some climb quickly, others choose to remain on the intermediate steps to help those still climbing." The alchemist revealed to Cayce something that deeply moved him. He said he had followed the sleeping prophet's work from the beginning, subtly influencing his readings, directing him toward the most important truths. Cayce wasn't channeling information from the void. He was being guided by a network of ancient consciousnesses that had chosen to remain active on Earth. "You are not an ordinary medium," said the entity. "You are a chosen spokesperson, and when your time comes, you will face the same choice we faced: depart or remain. Serve from the other side or continue serving from this side." Share your own experience in the comments. Have you ever felt the presence of ancient wisdom trying to communicate with you? Have you ever had insights that seemed to come from a source much deeper than your own mind? The conversation lasted all night, and when the sun rose, the entity made a final revelation that would forever change how Cayce saw his own mission. What he said about the destiny of souls in the period we're living in now, about a great planetary transition that's happening at this exact moment. This will connect all the dots you've been perceiving about the changes in our reality. What Edgar Cayce discovered that night transcended everything he had understood about life, death, and the purpose of human existence. The alchemist revealed that we are living in a unique period in Earth's history, a moment when the barriers between dimensions are becoming thinner, and this is directly affecting how long souls remain close after death. Earth is going through a vibrational elevation, explained the entity, and this change is creating an effect that you don't yet understand completely. Souls that die now remain close for much longer periods than in the past, because they know this is a crucial moment for human evolution. Helena Blavatsky had predicted exactly this in her final writings. She spoke about an era of transition where more souls would choose to remain close to Earth to help humanity during a period of massive spiritual awakening. In the times that will come, wrote Blavatsky in 1891, many souls that departed will return not through reincarnation, but by staying close to the physical plane. They will be the invisible guides of a new era of consciousness. Listen carefully to what the alchemist revealed to Cayce. At this moment in history, there are more conscious souls close to Earth than in any previous period. They are here to support an awakening process that's happening on a planetary scale, and many sensitive people are beginning to perceive this increased presence. You call it intuition, synchronicities, inner guidance, said the entity. But in reality, it's a massive network of consciousnesses that chose to remain to help. Some for decades, others for centuries, all working together to elevate human vibration. The deepest secret Cayce discovered is this: we are not alone in our evolutionary journey. There exists an invisible brotherhood of souls that remained close specifically to help us cross this period of transformation, and they are communicating with us in increasingly direct ways. The veils are becoming transparent, revealed the alchemist. Soon communication between the living and those who remained will be as natural as talking to someone in the same room. Death will lose its terror because people will see that it's just a frequency change, not a separation. Helena Blavatsky had described this phenomenon as the return of etheric vision, a natural ability that humanity possessed in the past and that is being restored. The ability to consciously perceive the subtle dimensions where these souls remain active. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share it now, because this information isn't just knowledge, it's a key to understanding why so many people are having intense spiritual experiences at this moment in history. And then the alchemist made the final revelation. What he said about the specific role of people who are attracted to this information, about our real mission in this incarnation, will explain why you were guided to this truth today. What Edgar Cayce discovered that night has implications that go far beyond spiritual curiosity. We are facing a revelation that can completely transform how humanity understands death, grief, and our own eternal nature. And the consequences of this understanding are revolutionary. When people understand that their loved ones haven't departed but have just changed frequency, explained the alchemist, the entire industry of fear around death will disappear. Hospitals, funeral homes, life insurance, everything will be transformed by a new understanding of the continuity of consciousness. Helena Blavatsky had predicted this social transformation. In her writings, she spoke about an era where death will lose its sting because humanity will rediscover its multidimensional nature, where grief will be replaced by celebration of transition, where communication with those who remained close will become a natural part of life. Imagine a world where children grow up knowing they can talk to their grandparents who passed away, wrote Blavatsky, where spiritual counseling comes directly from ancient souls who remained close, where the accumulated wisdom of centuries is available to anyone willing to listen. But there's an even deeper aspect. The alchemist revealed to Cayce that this change in understanding death is directly connected to the evolution of human consciousness itself. We are developing new senses, new perceptual abilities that will allow us to consciously interact with these subtle dimensions. You are becoming multi-dimensional beings, said the entity. The separation between life and death is an illusion that is dissolving. Soon you will realize that you have always been eternal beings having temporary experiences in physical bodies. Pay attention to the practical implications of this. If souls really remain close for prolonged periods, this means we can continue learning from them, receiving guidance from them, even collaborating with them on projects that transcend physical life. Death stops being an end and becomes an expansion of connection possibilities. Doctors will begin to recognize the presence of souls during the death process. predicted the alchemist. Therapists will learn to include those who remained close in the family healing process. Educators will discover how to access the wisdom of ancient souls to enrich learning. Helena Blavatsky envisioned a society where temples and churches would be replaced by interdimensional communication centers, where priests and pastors would become facilitators of dialogue between the living and those who remained, where spirituality would stop being based on faith and become based on direct experience, for those who always knew there was more, who felt the invisible presence of greater wisdom. You are the pioneers of this new era. You were chosen to receive this information first because your souls are already tuned to these subtler frequencies. Humanity is preparing to reunite with its cosmic family, said the alchemist, and this reunion begins with the recognition that death was never a real separation. And then he made the final revelation about our responsibility. What each of us can do now to accelerate this transformation, how we can become conscious bridges between worlds and help both the living and those who remained close. When the alchemist was about to withdraw from that conversation that forever changed Edgar Cayce's life, he made a final revelation that connects directly with you who are listening to this now. He said that people who are attracted to this information didn't arrive here by chance. You are souls that made a specific commitment before incarnating in this time. You came to be the bridges, said the entity, to help humanity remember its true nature, to dissolve the fear of death and restore natural communication between dimensions. You are the translators between worlds. Edgar Cayce understood at that moment that his own mission was much greater than he had imagined. It wasn't just about physical healing or personal guidance. It was about preparing humanity for a great reunion, the conscious re-encounter with all those who had apparently departed, but who in reality remained close, waiting for us to develop the necessary senses to perceive them again. Helena Blavatsky had received a similar mission decades earlier. In her final days, she wrote, "My work here was to plant seeds of truth that will bloom when humanity is ready, and that time is coming faster than they imagine. Now your time has come." If you were guided to this information, if your heart recognizes the truth in these words, if you've always felt you have a greater mission in this life, it's because you are part of this awakened network of souls that came to facilitate this transition. Your mission begins with a simple choice. Stop fearing death. Start speaking openly about the continuity of consciousness. Share these truths with others who are ready to receive them. And especially, open your heart to perceive the presence of those who remained close. When you stop looking for them up there and start feeling them here beside you, said the alchemist, communication will become natural, and then you will become the teachers that humanity needs for this new era. Pay attention. Every time you validate someone's experience of feeling the presence of a loved one who passed away, every time you offer comfort based on the truth of continuity instead of the fear of separation, every time you live with the awareness that you are an eternal being having a temporary human experience, you are fulfilling your mission. If you made it this far, it wasn't coincidence and your soul knows why it came, and now you have the tools to begin. Leave a comment telling, what was the greatest revelation you had listening to this narrative? How did this change your perspective about death and about your own life mission? And if you feel this information should reach other people who are ready to awaken, if you recognize that you're part of this network of souls that came to transform human understanding about life and death, share this truth, because the time of hiding this knowledge is over. The great reunion between the living and those who remained close is beginning, and you are one of the bridges that will make this possible. Welcome to your true mission. Welcome to the awakening you came to facilitate. Welcome to the future that Helena Blavatsky and Edgar Cayce saw, and that now becomes reality through people like you. The greatest secret has been revealed. Now it's up to you to decide what to do with this truth.